Hello, and welcome back to the Magical Journey podcast. My name is Daniel Cahoon. I'm the host of Magical Journey. And before we get started tonight, I want to do just a little bit of housekeeping, let you guys know where you can find all the good stuff related to the podcast and to the information that we bring to you here at Magical Journey podcast. Uh, First and foremost, the most important place to check out is magicaljourney.com. That is where you're going to find all of your information that you are needing as far as who, what, when, where, and why. We're doing some really, it's being updated constantly. So there's always some work being done over there, new things being added, new features being added all the time. So go and check that out. Along with that, I would encourage you guys to pay attention to the link for the email and how to get in touch with me if you would like to share your story with us. Come on to the podcast and be a part of this journey with us. And I know it's not for everybody, but I do have a Patreon site which does go along with hand in hand with all of the episodes that we provide here. So there's extra material on there. It goes a little in depth into, more in depth, I should say, into what we're talking about and give you more evidence to back up what we're bringing to you. So that is the story there. So tonight, I'm really excited, guys, because tonight is a big step in the direction of bringing a story to light that I've touched on a few times. There's a couple of episodes dedicated to the Trenny Gibson case right now, but tonight I gotta tell you, we're gonna deep dive into the main characters in Trenny's life before, during, and after the disappearance. And to do that, I have with me tonight one of the, if not the most well known and informative person on the Trenny Gibson case with us tonight. And let's welcome to the stage Laura Riste.
Hi,
Laura, hey, how are you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
You know what? I am really good. I'm really excited. We got a lot of people who are fans of yours, your work, have followed you, like myself,
Oh,
for a while now. That are,
thanks. I'm blushing.
it's very rare that we get the opportunity to have somebody who has been working on something as big as this case is for as long as you have, and to have the information that you have gathered over time. Like your catalog of information is phenomenal on this case. And I think that is one of the things that keeps Trenny and her story alive, is the fact that we do have resources out there that are updated and, continue to gather momentum in the case. Because, so many times we get, like Dennis Martin and some of the other cases, they're big stories. Over time, they get stagnant because we don't really ever learn anything new.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
and with Trini's case, you have kept it active and alive and vital for a very long time now.
No, well, I'm pleased, very pleased to be Trenny's voice and be a voice and an advocate for the missing and the kind of forgotten and the ones that kind of fell under the rug or were swept away. So I'm very honored that I have that designation, and I'm very pleased to be here. Very excited. Um, so without further ado, I guess let's take a flying leap into this case.
Right. So there are some characters, and like honestly, when you look at the cast of
There's a
characters
whole
in
bunch
Trini's
of
life,
Roberts.
there's a lot of Roberts. It's a Robert
Yep.
Club.
Yeah,
There's a lot of very intriguing backstories behind some of these guys. And,
definitely. Yeah,
and when you look at it, um, it almost appears as if it's a perfect storm of characters who are involved that make it very difficult to get to the heart of the matter.
right. Yes, absolutely.
And I think that is, I mean, case in point, I mean, let's talk about the dad for a moment. You know, Robert, number one.
Yeah,
Uh,
so we have Mr. Gibson Sr., Robert Otis
right,
Gibson Sr.
yeah. Um, he, by all means, comes across at first and on the surface as being, very much the typical dad who's missing a child. He's concerned. He appears to be, under a lot of stress, worrying about his daughter. There's uncertainty, but there's also this undercurrent of almost, I don't want to say, I don't want to say the undercurrent of arrogance, but
That's okay, I'll say it. He was he was arrogant.
very.
Uh,
Tell us a little bit about uh, Robert Gibson Sr. and what your view is on his, I guess, his part in making this case incredibly difficult at times.
well, Robert Gibson Sr., he and Hope Gibson, they had been married for probably about 18, 19 years when Trenny went missing. And Mr. Gibson, he was personnel director for a chemical company in Knoxville. They produced industrial chemicals. It was called Malter International, and his job required him to travel out of town, usually for 2 weeks every month. So he'd be gone, and then Hope would be on her own with Trenny's help, managing the household, and Trenny and her sister Tina, they helped with childcare a lot because they had a little brother who was only 6 years old when Trenny went missing. From what I gather, and in talking to people that knew the Gibson family, neighbors, other classmates of Trenny's, Bob's, and Tina's, uh, Hope Gibson was the disciplinarian. Not so much Mr. Gibson. That role mainly fell to Hope. Um, Hope told me that she was abused by Mr. Gibson, and that was fairly common for those times. She didn't tell me if what kind of abuse it was, but it was abuse. Um, I've also been told he liked to chase skirt. He had a few girlfriends on the side. He'd been involved in a few rather nefarious activities, and we kind of talked about this before. Kind of what I'd call like insurance fraud, things like that. Kind of more white collar crime where you didn't really actually get your hands dirty, kind of thing. He had taken some money from a Boy Scout troop that he was in charge of. He ran an insurance scam, the kind of thing where you set fire to your house, but you move all the appliances and good furniture out first, and then you torch it, kind of thing. He had also done some time in jail for a bank heist, but it wasn't actually a stick him up and throw the money in this bag type of thing. It was more like an inside job where he wrote a bad check, and someone that worked at the bank was in on it with him and gave him the money, kind of thing. But Mr. Gibson actually did some time in jail for that. I think I actually sent that to you. You can view it on Ancestry.
Right.
So he wasn't actually someone on the more up and up. Just looking at pictures of him, I've never had an interview with the man, but just looking at pictures of him, he gives me the heebie-jeebies.
A little
Um,
bit.
the one thing that I didn't care for Mr. Gibson, and it's easy enough when reporters are interviewing someone um, to take the stance kind of to their own, however they're going to make it fit the story or fit the narrative. But I think I sent you all those articles from the University of Tennessee, from the old newspapers and so on, covering Trenny's case and the search. And if you've ever read those and kind of thought about them a bit, Mr. Gibson twists every story to make it sound like it's all about him. And I mean, his daughter's missing. We don't know what the hell's happened to her, what's going on, but he always twists the story around and makes it look like it's somehow about him. And that really doesn't sit well with me. That's something that a narcissist does, or someone with those sorts of tendencies. But enough psychology 101. That was something that I thought. Now, Mr. Gibson, ironically, I found out that the FBI was tailing him for some reason after Trenny disappeared, and they followed him more than once to California where he was flying, and they lost the tail. I'm in the process right now of trying to get the FBI reports through the Freedom of Information Act. Michael Bouchard and I were on I think it's our 8th or our 9th try right now. So, but with Dennis Martin, he was finally able to get Dennis's FBI report for the search, and I think he said it took about 20 tries. So we're about halfway there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, he was away when Trenny disappeared. He was in New Orleans on business, and he was actually due to fly in the night that Trenny disappeared. So October 8th, 1976. And he was flying into McGee Tyson. And as far as I know, it was planned that Hope would be going to McGee Tyson to pick him up, or he'd be getting a taxi home. And kind of that's when everything fell apart. About 8:30, the guidance counselor at the school called the Gibson residence, told Miss Gibson that Trenny was missing, and he actually came to the house, collected Hope, and they went together to the airport to collect Mr. Gibson.
Wow.
And then from there they went to the Smokies.
So Robert Gibson Sr., it's very interesting that you mentioned that the FBI was kind of had raised an eyebrow about him because one of the things that we learn as this story starts unfolding is there's a lot of speculation about his relationship with his daughter, how they got along, if they got along. There's some of us that kind of question whether or not he may have been somewhat abusive to Trenny.
Well, in speaking with Trenny's classmates, and there weren't a lot of them that really knew her, and they all came to the consensus that they could be friendly with Trenny at school, but she was not about to ask anybody to come home with her after school or on the weekend or holidays. There was some reason why she wasn't interested in bringing kids home. It was just kind of fine to see them after school. And Hope Gibson glossed that over. She just said Trenny was a homebody, kept to herself, didn't really interact with too many other kids her own age. And I find that a little hard to believe. I think there was a reason that Trenny didn't want anyone coming home with her. I had a friend that was somewhat similar, and just her home life wasn't good growing up. And I kind of knew that and didn't push the issue. So she'd come home with me occasionally, but I didn't go to her place because I knew that the atmosphere there wasn't good. I know that Trenny looked after her younger brother a lot. She helped a lot with the housework. From what I heard, they tended to speak down to her at times, that sort of thing. And I think Trenny was just thinking, I got another couple years of this, and then I can move out. I can go to university, and then I can do my own thing. So I think she was of the mind, she just had to stick it out for just a while longer.
Yeah, that it's really it's hard not to feel kind of feel some sense of just almost dread for her in so many ways when it comes to the relationship that appears to have kind of taken place with her family, with her parents especially. The brother is one of the characters that really, the older brother, one of the characters too that we look at and go, what really happened there with him? Because he, by all means, is pretty much, I mean, the lack of better words, is viewed as seen as rather irresponsible. He tends to come across as being somebody who is very detached. He was, known to be a drug user, among other things, and just not. I mean, he was old enough to go into the military, but
Right.
he took no responsibility at all for his younger siblings. There
No.
seems to be very little uh, in the way of his, like, you don't hear a lot about his relationship with his dad at all.
No, really, like I've said before, I know Bob and Trenny were close. And from what I understand, Tina was fairly close with Bob as well. So they got along with each other fine. But that 1970s persona of the females doing the housework, things like that, and the oldest male heir to the family throne kind of thing. Usually, the oldest male was the one that the family would tend to kind of, pin that is going to go to university and get a wonderful job, marry, have children, that sort of thing. And the way the family was structured there, it didn't really seem that there was any pressure on Bob to fulfill that sort of thing. um, from what I've heard from Gibson relations, Bob was kind of going through a period in his teens where he was trying to figure out who or where or where he fit in. I mean, we all go through that, but the expectation is still there once we finish high school. It's either you get a job, you go to college or university, or you join the military. Those are your options. You can't just lay here and collect dust kind of thing. So the family did say, though, that when Bob joined the Navy, they were all really pleased because they thought, at least he had some sort of a direction, and then maybe he could figure out from there what he wanted to do.
Mhm.
So at least there was that. But Bob went through a period, where he'd lay in his room. He drank, he took drugs, he listened to records. He cleaned up his act for a while, and he was showing up at school in a shirt and a tie with a Bible, and then the kids were calling him Bible Bob. And he sold all his records and things and tried to, turn over a new leaf. One person I talked to said that Bob seemed to be very attracted to girls that were just like a mess. Um, she said she remembered one girl that Bob was dating, and actually he later married this same girl. But she was in the bathroom one day trying to kill herself, and this lady I talked to ran to go get help. Fortunately, help arrived. Everything was okay, but he tended to go for the really crazy girls.
Mm,
Yeah. Uh,
wow.
so unfortunately, Bob, he did join the military. He went through basic training. His first time home in October was the first time that he'd seen his family since he left in July. And he actually wasn't 18 till until November, so he was only actually 17 when he joined up.
Wow. Wow. And he had, uh, Bob was rather he had a really good working relationship with his sister. They they were kind of, and for just on looking at the family matrix, Bob and Trini were kind of best buds in a way. They were like they uh, Bob actually told the forestry people there in the parks, like Trini would not just disappear like this. With me being in town, she's like you don't understand. That's not my sister's thing.
As far as I've been told, they were very close, pretty much from the time that Trenny came home from the hospital after she was born. They were close. They were going to kind of, get through this life together, kind of thing, and whatever. I don't think that Bob ever would have harmed Trenny intentionally. And I always say this: it would have had to have been some kind of complete and total accident, or her disappearance had something to do with somebody or something he was involved in or with. But I can't ever see him harming her.
It's interesting that you say intentionally, because what one of the things that comes to mind with me is, Bob being Bob and having the kind of the older sibling mentality of just kind of like you know basically just inking through by the skin of his teeth. It sounds like at times. Um, you know, I could see him very easily, getting involved unintentionally with something that was not necessarily for his best good.
Hmm.
And unfortunately Trini being in the middle of it. And I
Yeah.
think that's one of the things that when it comes to Bob and his character, I think that's one of the things that makes his part in the story very interesting and stand out. Otherwise, like Bob as a person, there's not a lot about him that raises a lot of question. It seems like to me overall about his character, or about what part he may have played or may not have played with Trini's disappearance, except for, like I said, the fact that Bob is so much Bob. Uh,
Well, like I've also often said, Bob came home from the military on a Wednesday, and
mm,
Trenny disappeared Friday, and that is always been an odd coincidence. And there's always this little nasty little song that plays in the back of my head about Bob coming home Wednesday, Trenny disappeared Friday. The other question that I have is, Hope had to back out of that field trip kind of at the last minute because she found out it was going to be an all day thing and there was going to be no babysitter for Trenny's youngest brother. I mean, my family, the way they were and the way I was raised, it would have been okay, Bob, you got two options here. You can either go on the field trip and take my place as a chaperone, or I'm sorry, you're going to have to watch your little brother for the afternoon on Friday while I go on this field trip. And if that had been me, I would have been, yeah, sure, it doesn't matter. What would you rather I do? Like, would you rather A or B? I'm not sure why Bob wasn't given one of those options and why he was just kind of let out of the whole thing. In talking with, like I said, some of the extended family, they said probably because Bob wasn't responsible enough at the time for either task. Maybe he was making up for lost time when he was in basic training. I don't know. That part is a gray area. And I think that that was one of the things that Hope Gibson didn't want me to further prod and discover was Bob Gibson, Trenny's brother. That he had a few quirks, he had a few vices, perhaps. But that would have been one of the obvious options: is he take her place or he babysits.
Right, right. It's very interesting to me, again, when we talk about Bob, the things, I guess the thing that really sticks out of my mind about him is when you say that, Hope kind of tried to veer away from any, like, a lot of with him. She really did not want, uh, she kind of blocked people deliberately from digging too deep into Bob and Bob's
That
world.
was that was territory she didn't want explored.
Right, right. And so it always raises the question with me, why? What is it that puts Bob in that place where she's like, yeah, we're this is what we're not doing today.
Hmm.
Because most moms, they want to protect their children, but it seems to me that Hope was almost overprotective of Bob.
She rather, she kind of pleased him. That is a characteristic that does happen at times in families. Sometimes with the boys over the girls. The boys are kind of petted and pleased, and the girls, they do the work. It just depends on the family dynamic. Sometimes it's the youngest child, sometimes it's the oldest, and then the middle one kind of gets whatever's left over, type of thing. It just sort of depends on the whole dynamic of it. um, I know that Hope was and still is a very religious lady. She's Southern Baptist. The kids went to church, twice a day. They went on Wednesday evenings and then twice on Sunday. They had Bible study every morning. It was a very religious household, much different than the way I grew up. But
Right,
that was what they were about. Hope was very involved with the church, activities with the church, and she wanted her family to have their circle and surround themselves with people from the church, not so much as their kids at school or whatever. She would have rather Trenny's friends had been other followers of the same church.
right. So there was a tendency with a tendency for her to almost, you get this kind of wall in a sense around them,
Right.
in that sense. And I find that very interesting too. There's a lot of shielding going on in the story. A lot of the characters, especially in the immediate family. Um, for instance, Miracle, the baby of the family. You've said before that he is very different, for lack of a better term. Again, there's a lot of when you go and you try to research anything about Miracle Gibson, you literally run into a brick wall. There's like I've done all kinds of research to try to locate even like just an image of him online, and you literally can't, like anything that I've
I
done so
I can
far.
send you some. He's mainly lived with his mother most of his adult life. That's why there's not a whole lot out there. Like, I don't think he's had like a phone or a electricity bill or a natural gas bill or anything like that in his own name. I think he's just lived with his mother, and that's been it. When I've talked to Miracle, I've talked to him quite a few times. Sometimes it's like I don't have the patience for this today. I can't do this. He wa- he wants to talk in riddles and things like that. And some days, I don't mind that for 10, 15 minutes. And after that, he's just a pain in the ass. I can't do this. But I have gleaned some information out of Miracle. He has fond memories of Trenny. She basically raised him. She was there for Miracle, and he has very fond memories of her. When I ask him other things, though, well, then that tends to kind of veer off in all directions. At some In talking to him, sometimes you can tell like he's almost been coached what to say and what not to say, and where to go and where not to go, if that
Hmm.
makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. So when you've talked to him, how does he, what is the connection with him and Bob as far as, like, obviously Bob was older, Bob has since passed,
Mhm.
so there's not a current connection with him, obviously, but what, how does Miracle treat the connection between him and his brother compared to that of his of Trini? Because you said that he had very fond memories of Trini,
Well,
and
he was definitely closer to Trenny because she was the one that was always there. He didn't have anything negative to say about Bob. He said that Bob had married twice, had two daughters. They didn't really have a whole lot to do with the family, but Miracle had met the oldest daughter once or twice. Um, Other than that, he didn't really have a lot to say. Other than Bob passed away, he was only 42 when he died. Other than Bob passed away, and he's been gone for just about 25 years now.
wow, yeah, Bob was definitely he was very young at the point that he passed.
And I've also talked to Bob's two daughters. The one, I suspect that something very negative happened. I didn't press her as to what, but she doesn't want to talk about her father's side of the family. Just not interested in it, and I respect that. She didn't have much good things to say about the one meeting that she did have. She just thought that they were a bunch of holy roller Jesus freak sort of thing, and she didn't care to see them anymore. So I just kind of left it at that. Her mother and Bob broke up. I believe she would have been about 3 or 4. So I don't know if something happened between her and her father, or if it was just like she didn't want anything to do with her dad's side of the family, but she didn't really want to talk about it, wasn't interested, and I just left it at that.
Wow, yeah, yeah.
So
Um,
then, oddly enough, sorry to interrupt you, oddly enough, a little while after I talked to her, I had her I had her sister-in-law reach out to me, and the sister-in-law, see, her mother that was married to Bob Gibson, she later remarried and had two boys. So this daughter had two half brothers, and this lady that contacted me was married to one of them. And she talked to me a little bit, and she said, part of the problem is that she knows that she has a half sister. She doesn't know really where to look for her, but she'd really, really like to find her. But because the family broke down, Bob and her mother split up. Bob went one way, her mother went another with her. Her mother didn't want to talk about Bob or anything like that. She found out she had this half sister that was about 9 years younger than her, and had never met her, but would like to find her and let her know, hey, we shared the same dad. So I said, well, what do you know about this woman that Bob married? So this this sister-in-law, she told me what she knew, which really wasn't much. It was a first name, a last name, and a possible year of marriage. And I said, well, I can't promise anything, but I'll see what I can do. And I said, you got to make sure that you realize that if I find this person, she might not want anything to do with any of you. I said that you got to be prepared for that fact that might happen. Oh yeah, no problem. Anyway, I found her. I found this lady that Bob was had a relationship with in the early 90s. Unfortunately, she passed away. But I did find her daughter, and I reached out to her, and I felt sorry for the poor girl because I I don't do this for a living. But anyway, I managed to convince her finally that this was legit, this was real, and she had somebody that was looking for her, and they were potentially related. And this poor girl, she had no idea that Bob was her father. No idea, none. So I put her in touch with this sister-in-law, who then put her in touch with the daughter. They did a DNA test, and they found out that they did share a dad. But the younger one had no idea that Bob was even her father. She didn't even have a photo of him, nothing. The best that she could tell me was, she said, I'm just going to be frank with you, my parents were both addicts. So her mother was an addict, and apparently Bob was an addict. And then this girl was basically raised by an aunt and uncle. So she really had nothing to do with Bob's side of the family whatsoever growing up. She just knew her aunts and uncles and, cousins and that sort of thing.
Wow. So
it was
the
really a shocker for her, but things worked out well. She found her half sister. It was a good reunion. Everybody was happy. There was no, I don't want to know you or any of this. So, I was pleased that much came out of this. That was good. That was positive.
right, right, because there could have been a lot of very not so good things that could have come out of that overall.
Well, the other thing that happened too, Trenny's cousin and his wife told me that Bob actually disappeared after Trenny did.
Hmm.
And nobody knew where he was for about a year or two. And what are the chances that Trenny's going to go missing? Your sister goes missing, and then you go missing, kind of thing. And everybody was up in arms. What in the hell is going on here in this family, kind of thing. And Bob resurfaced. He was living in the Philippines.
You had mentioned that to me before, that he had taken residence in the Philippines at one point,
Mhm.
which I found very interesting too, because it's kind of like that in itself kind of raised the question with me of what's up with that. Um, I want to backtrack for a moment, because one of the
Sure.
things that I find very interesting is, in the mix of all of this chaos that was going on with the family, with the kind of like just shadiness revolved around so many of them. Here's Tina, the middle child of the family, who, by all accounts, appears to have had similar problems to Bob. There's some indications she may have had some drug problems. There may have,
Yeah.
yeah, that there was definitely some denial going on there with some stuff. Uh, what is the story on Tina? Because it's kind of like she's the invisible black sheep in the middle of all this.
Well, Tina had it rough after Trenny disappeared, for sure. I've spoken to a lot of her classmates. A lot of them knew Trenny and Tina both, but were more Tina's age. And they say the same thing. It was a very dark period for Tina. Her dad was terrible. Her activities were restricted. Her parents went through this stage after Trenny disappeared. They had like to throw out all their cassette tapes and their records and their paperback books, because everything was evil and bad and that kind of thing. And Tina got called a whore more than once. It was just not good. It was pretty rough for her. So Tina, she graduated from Bearden. She's a very striking, pretty girl. Probably about a year or two after she graduated, she got married. So she got married fairly young, and the marriage didn't last very long. Then she met another fellow, and they dated for a while, and she got pregnant, and she had her daughter Dominique. She found out while she was pregnant that the guy she was dating was married. So she was on her own, a single parent with her young daughter. Hope Gibson helped out quite a bit, babysitting and so on and so forth. Then later, Tina married another fellow by the name of Robert. So there's another Robert in this story. And they lived in Texas for a time. He had a job with an oil company. Eventually, they moved back to Knoxville. The marriage didn't survive. Their youngest daughter that they had was named Angelique. And Tina suffered from alcoholism, drug addiction. And Angelique, she grew up in foster care. And I've found Angelique and I've spoken with her. I've also found Tina's husband Robert, and we're in touch, and I've spoken to him too about his time with Tina and so on, and what he remembers her telling him about Trenny and that sort of thing.
Do you feel like, because it's kind of obvious that in a sense that there's possibilities that Bob may have had, you know, a little bit um, of his hand in dealing with whatever happened with Trini. But do you feel like Tina may have somehow been connected as well with the disappearance?
Not so much. Mainly because, well, she was a little bit younger than Trenny. She did know about Trenny and Calvin Bowman. That wasn't what really wasn't a secret with her. I don't feel though that she had anything to do with Trenny's disappearance, unless there was something that she knew that perhaps Trenny had confided in her that she probably should have told and she didn't. I did get to speak to Tina once before she passed away. She died in 2016. And she seemed to think that her father had something to do with Trenny's disappearance. She just thought he was an evil man.
Wow. Why does that not surprise me? Again,
Like Tina, she was suffering pretty badly from addiction when I did talk to her. I don't know if that would have, colored things or clouded her judgment any, but she had nothing good to say about her father and thought that he was somehow involved in it.
it is very interesting when you look at, you know, Robert Gibson Sr. and you look at his demeanor, his history, there's so very many things about him that you hear as you start to, you know, pull these pieces together from this case. Uh, he First of all, I find it very interesting that um, Hope takes the position that she takes with a lot of things revolving around the case. She's very protective of some information. She's very protective of certain people in the case, especially when it comes to Bob and and his connection or lack of, in some ways, to the
Mm-hmm.
case. It's But Robert Senior, it appears though there's always this dark cloud, this question every time the man's name is brought up as to how deep in the crap cake he really was when it came to the disappearance of Trini, because there's so many things, his narcissism and a lot of other things just don't add up. It does not. So when your middle daughter is saying, you know, he's shady, you got to watch him, it kind of brings you to that place. You know what I'm saying?
Well, one thing that struck the family the wrong way was Trenny's two uncles and one of her cousins. They came to the Smokies the day after Trenny disappeared to aid in the search.
Right.
And they were out there helping with the search. They did see Hope a couple of times. They did see Robert Jr. once, but there was no sign of Mr. Gibson Sr. And they thought this peculiar or so not peculiar, given they knew Mr. Gibson a little bit. But hey, man, I mean, your daughter's missing. We're trying to find her. Where the hell are you? And he was in his room in the hotel they were staying at in Gatlinburg watching football. Meanwhile, everybody else is tearing up the park trying to find Trenny, and he's in this hotel room, warm and dry, watching football. And they just couldn't wrap their heads around that. You know, they weren't exactly fans of Mr. Gibson, but they were really gobsmacked that he would stoop that low as to not, be out there trying to help them search. I mean,
Right. Right.
family's family. You got to do what you got to do. I mean, yeah, but no, he was not out there. The cousin told me that the only time that Mr. Gibson was actually out of the room and in the park was if somebody wanted to interview him. Other than that, he just stayed in the hotel in Gatlinburg. He had nothing more to do with it. But Hope was seen. She was out, and they did see Robert, but not Mr. Gibson.
That is incredibly interesting because, again, like you said, you would think, you know, this is your child, you would be vested in trying to find out what was going on, and play a big part in the search and gathering as much information. I mean, you, unless my thought there though is is that possibly a telltale sign that he knew something, that he may have known more than what the average person did about?
Possibly, or just incredibly lazy to the power of infinity. I don't know how you could not do that. Even Mr. Gibson was a bigger person, but I anybody would still have had a raincoat on and something and been out there, trying to do something, or at least being out there and being supportive for his wife, being out and just being support for her.
Yeah, yeah. See, that's what the thing. I again, when I look at this, and I'm trying to look at it through the lens of you know not being judgmental toward any of these characters. At the same time, you really can't help but be to a point. Um, there seems to be, that undercurrent. A lot of questions arise about, everybody's actions in this. Uh, you, where in the middle of all of this, here's Bob. He was literally. I mean, he came home from doing uh, his time there, doing his what was he, a boot camp or whatever at that point,
Yeah, he's a boot camp. Yeah.
and and so he's kind of walking in on this and going, okay, well, this is not right. Something is not right here. Then you've got the other side of this where you've got the two kids. Tina obviously rather distressed. I mean, how can she not be? Her sister has disappeared. There's no
Mhm.
there's no word on what's happened, and and this is a scary situation. Miracle was way too young to even comprehend what was going on at the time. So again, it goes back to you, Bob being the older sibling. You know, he had a lot of emotional investment in what was going on with his sister at the time, and yet,
Well, absolutely, and I think the consensus was they would find her. You
right,
know, they would find her. There were all these people searching. They had the helicopters, everything, and I think the consensus was that if she'd managed to survive the night, that they would probably find her the next day. Um, but I question why Mr. Gibson, even if he wasn't fit and able to, grid search with everyone, why he wasn't even out at least just being there for his wife and being there for Bob.
right. I guess that's it kind of leaves me hanging at is, you know, if Robert Gibson did not know more than what was on the surface, if he was really just kind of as uninformed as everybody else, then why the detachment to everything going on around, and what was, he didn't even really have a response or a even an inkling of a connection with his son enough to you be there for him at this point. So there's this big question
Right.
mark next to him in a way for me, as what are you doing? What part did you really have to play here? And going back to Bob, I kind of go, was there something that your dad had on you, something that your dad knew about you and your part with this, that made him kind of distance himself, you know, because he was like,
True.
I don't want to, yeah, this is beyond what I want to be part of at this point. And it's kind of like he just threw his hands up and was like, okay, I'm just going to go hide in my room.
Hmm.
So to me,
That's
yeah,
another way to look at it too.
yeah.
It's interesting because when you research this, you find that after that weekend, that's the first weekend that Trenny was missing. So
Mhm.
that would have been the 9th and 10th of October, 1976. After that, Hope seems resigned to the fact that they're not going to find her. But Mr. Gibson, he keeps pressing, keep searching, keep looking, so on. There's another article that talks about how distressed he was when the search was called off at the
Mhm.
end of October, first part of November. Although that the Rangers were going to search just on a limited basis, but Mr. Gibson is pretty distressed that they've called the search off, and he was very, very vocal about getting together another search for the spring of 1977. And the Park Service fought and fought and fought him on that. They said that if there was anything in that park, they would have found her, unless she's in an area they couldn't search that was thickety, or they couldn't get to it, kind of thing, or whatever. Mr. Gibson talked about bringing in cadaver dogs and that sort of resource. I've read through letters from the National Park Service, and they just fought tooth and nail. They thought there was nothing for them to find, so why waste the manpower on continuing the search? And Mr. Gibson finally did get another search going in the spring of 77, but they didn't find anything.
Right. He was actually, uh, Mr. Gibson actually went as far as contacting then President Carter and
Right.
President Carter was instrumental in helping to get another search going, because there was a connection between the Gibsons and the then President Carter.
Well, at least Mr. Gibson said there was.
Mhm.
Remember we talked about Mr. Gibson and playing pro football and the
Oh yeah.
the evening my husband and I spent sifting through the player rosters and everything, and we couldn't find anything. He never ever played for them. I don't know if he actually wrote his own obituary or someone else wrote it and they believed that that fact was true, that he played for the Pittsburgh Steelers, but he
Mhm.
did not, according to anything that we were able to find out.
Right. So there's this tendency, again, for him to call suspicion to himself, not only because he is blatantly lied, for lack of a better way of putting it, about some stuff within his obituary. There's misinformation there, but
Well, unless he filled in and he was the team mascot, or maybe he was the guy that blew up the footballs. I don't know, but we could find no no record of him actually playing.
wow. The, the I guess the thing that really kind of is that moment that makes you go, wow, I, is we have Mr. Gibson who was he was out of town a lot. He was kind of the detached father, the guy that dad checks out kind of thing. Um, we've got Hope who was for lack of any other way of putting it was kind of the head of the house in a sense, in that she was the one who kept the bills paid, the business rolling there in the house and so forth. Um, she, by all indications, was kind of the brain power of the family in a sense. And then, but with all that going on with the two parents, you've got this kind of, by the way, Trini has a boyfriend story going on here, and
Right.
and he, Trini's disappearance raised a lot of questions about not only her brother's connection to the disappearance, but there was a lot of things that made us go, well, what about these guys? What do these guys have to do with
Mhm.
Trini? Before, during, and after all of this, because there's um, there's Robert Simpson who was questionable to say the least in the whole story,
Yeah, he
and
had a few little
I don't. To say that Robert Simpson is was a minor character would be downplaying him greatly. There are so many things about him and his character and his story, how he plays the parts that he plays in all of this, that makes you really, it makes you look at him with a lot of speculation and a lot of serious questions and doubt. Calvin Bowman is the other one that when I hear his name and I see how he's connected to the story, I understand that there's a lot of misgivings about Calvin. Uh, you know,
yeah.
there's a lot of
Uh
misgivings.
like well Calvin Bowman, he went by the nickname Keg or Kegan,
Uh,
and he was from a large family. And he was actually a very, very skilled baseball player. If he had perhaps pursued that, it might have been a way out for him. Anyway, he attended Bearden, as did his brothers and sisters. Trenny was good friends with his sister Annette. And Calvin and Trenny, they knew each other. They'd gone to Bearden Junior High together and then on to Bearden High. And they got together in Trenny's sophomore year. So anyway, when I spoke with Calvin here last summer, when I was able to interview him, he said that they had been seeing each other for probably about a month. He said that they would arrange it at school. She'd leave her window open for him. Then he would find a ride with somebody because the area that he lived in was fairly far removed from the area of Knoxville where Trenny lived. And he'd get a ride. If he could get a ride, he'd come over to Trenny's. The window would be open. He'd come in and they'd do their thing, kind of thing. So this had been going on for about a month. Hope must have gotten suspicious. Tina, when I spoke with her, she said she knew about it, that Trenny and Calvin were seeing each other, kind of thing. And obviously it wasn't going to be kosher with the parents, so they had to do it on the sly. And in speaking with Trenny's other family, her cousins told me that pretty much anything those kids did, they would have to do it on the sly because they wouldn't have been allowed to do it otherwise. So anyway, this one particular evening in October 1975, Calvin came over to see Trenny. They had prearranged this. She had her window open, but Hope got wind probably that there was something going to happen. I don't know if she just had a feeling. I don't know if Trenny or Tina accidentally said something. But anyway, Hope had a gun. So when Calvin came across the lawn, he headed for Trenny's window, which was open. He went to go in and climb through Trenny's window, and when he did, that's when Hope shot him in the foot. Calvin said that he left then and went limping down the street with bleeding. He said that one of the neighbors came out on their porch, having heard the noise, and asked, what happened or whatever. And he said, yeah, I've been shot. So Calvin got medical attention. He was in the hospital, yada, yada. He was in the hospital for a day or two, and he said that Mr. Gibson came in and just tore a strip off him in the hospital. He was to stay away from Trenny. He wasn't good enough for her, didn't ever want to see him there again, kind of thing. They had Calvin charged. He had to go to court. Then he was sent to a juvenile detention center, and he was actually sentenced for 2 years. So it was a fairly harsh sentence on him. But he said that he did his best to behave himself, and he said the place was pretty crowded, and they kind of kicked him out after 6 months, and he just went back home, went back to Bearden, and that was kind of that. And he said that he'd see Trenny at school. Really, he said, what could he say to her? He said that he felt that Trenny should have maybe told her mother, that they were seeing each other, maybe tried to vouch for him a little bit, but she didn't. But he said he didn't really blame her either. He just kind of just let it go. She had turned her attention to a new boy. He was also a young black man, and he was a basketball player named Derek Scott. And I asked Calvin, I said, did you have any animosity to Trenny? Were you pissed at her? I said, her mother shot you in the foot, so, we could understand why, you'd still be upset. You served 6 months in the clink on account of her, can see you, being a little irate with her and stuff. And he said, not really. He said, her parents were just a bunch of crazy racists, and he blamed them more than he blamed her. I really don't think that Calvin would have harmed Trenny. Or if he did want to maybe scare her a little bit or something like that, he would have done it in Knoxville. I can't see him going to the park. He had no way to get there, for one thing, and that would be quite a favor he'd have to call in to get somebody to drive him all the way up there. He was not part of the horticulture class, And he said, and he admitted he was, kind of a badass in school. He spent a lot of time in the principal's inner office. So the principal kept pretty good tabs on him, and he said that Calvin was at school that day.
Mhm.
And I asked Calvin, I said, now, were you pals with Bob Gibson, her brother? And he said, not really. He said he knew Bob, like knew who he was and everything from the smoking pit at school. But he said they didn't really hang out together or anything like that. I asked him about Robert Simpson, and he said pretty much the same thing, just knew who he was, but they weren't close. I asked Calvin, I said, were you dealing drugs around Bearden? And he said, well, not really. He said he didn't have the means to kind of set himself up in that sort of thing. But if somebody came up to him and offered to pay him to hook them up, he'd be the middleman. He was fine with doing that. He just didn't make a point of, dealing drugs. Um, so we kind of left it at that. Calvin is no choir boy, and he admitted that. He ended up in a lot of trouble in 1979. He served time in prison for third-degree rape and assault. There's some DUI like that. The guy was no saint, and I'm not trying to, absolve him of anything bad that he did. But, like I said, he didn't really seem to harbor any animosity towards Trenny. He tended to direct that more at her folks. And I think that if he wanted to harm her, he would have done something in Knoxville if he wanted to badly enough.
Right,
He
right,
kind of seemed to kind of scratch his head too as to what happened to her, and kind of wonder, where has she been? Like, where could she have gone? And she never, you know, contacted anybody or anything ever again. And it was just really weird.
right, right. Yeah, I can see his like being in the position he was in, that he would have a lot of questions uh, about all of that. The thing that really sticks
But
out
I
for
mean,
me,
like the way I saw it, if he wanted to do anything, he probably would have done something to her folks, like, I don't know, slashed their tires, toilet papered
right,
their trees, stupid shit that kids do, whatever. But he didn't seem to harbor any ill feelings toward Trenny. Mostly her parents. He called them racist, and yeah.
right. I think the thing that really sticks out to me with all of this, as far as um, Calvin's part in all this, I, I'm very curious. I'm extremely curious, actually, as to you where Robert Simpson, because my thought here is that, first of all, I feel like there was some tension, in a sense, between Robert Simpson and Trenny. Uh, they obviously were friends. Robert Simpson spent a lot of time with Trenny that day. Uh, he walked with her, he hiked with her up to Andrews Bald, and there was almost a sense of that they were almost a little more than friends in a way. So I
Well,
guess
I
part of
think Robert would have liked it if they were. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, part of me wonders if Simpson, how Simpson and Calvin Bowman really, like, did they butt heads? Was there competition kind of feeling between the two of them when it came to Trini? What was their what was the relationship between the two of them because of Trini?
Well, the thing that I find odd is that statement that Robert Simpson made. This is after Trenny disappeared, when he went by the house and he told Tina that, if Calvin Bowman has Trenny, he'll kill her. If he doesn't have Trenny, then she must have run off with some horny hitchhiker.
Yeah,
Like, to me, the way he's talking, it's almost like, um, that fable, the fox and the grapes and the sour grapes kind of thing, where you don't get what you want, so you kind of you turn it around and make it look like it wasn't good enough in the first place. Does that make any sense?
It does. It does.
That's kind of what I picked up from it. That he couldn't get what he wanted, so he made it look like it wasn't any good in the first place.
Right. And that's kind
Um,
of, I guess, in a way, that kind of is, I feel like, the contention between Simpson, in his mind, I'm sure he's viewing, Calvin as the guy who, has what he wants. And there's
yeah.
there's that tendency for me to wonder, in the back of his mind, is Robert Simpson somehow, trying to bring Calvin into a not so good place with all of this?
Mhm.
Is he trying to raise questions, to people to make Calvin look like the bad guy in this? And even more importantly, I think in a sense, is is his connection with Bob, Robert Simpson's connection with Bob, does that weigh heavy on the possibility that there may be more weight to, Calvin's and, Robert's connection to Trini's disappearance, if that makes sense? Because it seems like to me there's a lot of it. It just doesn't add up. It's not adding up to me. Those two boys, you
Well,
know,
I think Trenny felt really safe with Robert Simpson.
right?
He was Bob's friend, you know. He wasn't conventionally attractive. And, being female, I kind of had the same sort of thing when I was in high school.
Mhm.
Um, I was friends with a few boys because in a lot of ways I found boys easier to talk to than girls. I had a few friends that were female as well, but a lot of times I found boys a little bit easier to talk to, especially the ones that in my mind wouldn't expect anything. So I was friends with this quintessential nerdy guy that everyone teased because he always seemed to be studying, kind of thing, or whatever. He had glasses and braces and whatever. He was a great friend. He's now an anesthesiologist. I was friends with another young man that was really overweight. And I was friends with another young man that he didn't come out and say it. We kind of knew it, and it was just the way it was. But he was homosexual. But those three guys, I could talk to them about it. We could talk about anything, and I felt very comfortable around them because I didn't feel like they expected anything from me as a girl.
Mhm.
I'm not even sure if they even realized I was a girl half the time. Like, we had a great time talking with each other and whatever, but I didn't feel like they expected anything from me. I didn't feel I had to act a certain way or anything just because they were guys and I was female. Um, and maybe that's why Trenny was quite comfortable with Robert Simpson. He was a very overweight young man, friend of her brother's, and she probably felt comfortable with him. He had a car. He was always willing to give people a ride wherever they wanted to go, kind of thing. So, like I can see her um, thinking that everything's safe or whatever. I've got Robert Simpson here at my back or whatever. We're going to go and we're going to have a great time on this field trip. And then something seemed to go south.
Do you think that maybe Robert and his presence kind of made Trini a little too comfortable in a sense, possibly, and may have been, uh, her comfort zone with him may have led to something happening that maybe took her by surprise, or
It very well could have,
that,
because
yeah.
yeah. Hope Gibson told me that Trenny didn't really want to go on this field trip. And Hope thought that it might be because that she was kind of a homebody and that the weather forecast was for crappy weather anyway. And maybe she thought it was a little bit because she wasn't going now as one of the chaperones. So, with Bob being home, he asked Robert Simpson if he would, just kind of keep an eye on Trenny and, make sure she was okay and whatever. And he was up to the task, and that didn't seem to be a problem. He said he'd do that. And they actually shared a seat on the bus on the way up to the Smokies. Trenny seemed fine. They hiked together to Andrews Bald. They sat and had their lunch. And then that's kind of when the task of looking after Trenny seemed to kind of fall apart. All of a sudden, Robert is going to look for a bear, and Trenny's walking back down to the bus by herself.
Yeah, that whole tracking a bear story. Wow. That whole
Well,
track.
it is a lame story, or it could have been that he did say that, and Trenny thought, I don't want any part of this. Like, you're an idiot. I'm sorry. I'm getting the hell out of here, and turned and left.
Right. I kind of feel like, I mean, does it not seem in a sense, because you know the the bottom line is somewhere along the line, uh, probably one of the most, to me, questionable characters in all of this. Again, goes right back to Hope. Uh, she was very, she tried very hard to make it difficult to uh, access some information. There was some things that she seemed to almost, like I said, kind of block people trying to find out about.
Exactly.
And she was very secretive, uh, very sketchy in the way that she went about some of this. But do you feel like maybe uh, between Hope and Bob, there was like they were almost, because I know there was a one point where they literally had to tell Simpson this is not cool, because he was going to the house and he was screening their phone calls.
Yeah, Robert Simpson was making a pest of himself in the
Mhm.
days following Trenny's disappearance, for lack of a better way to say it. So, Hope, Mr. Gibson Sr., they were, and some friends that had come for support, they were staying in Gatlinburg, and then they were, let's see, time remote. Sorry, here, something just flashed up on my screen. They were staying in Gatlinburg, and Hope had her sister Flossie staying at the house in Knoxville, and she was looking after Tina and Miracle and whatnot, until hopefully Trenny was found and the family could be reunited. And Flossie complained that she was having a terrible time trying to keep Robert Gibson out of their house. He kept coming over and trying to help, and his idea of helping was literally screening their phone calls. And this went on for a few days till Hope and Mr. Gibson came home to grab some clothing and whatever and head back. And they were actually able to confront Robert and get him to stop. But he was literally making a pest out of himself. I don't know if he was there thinking that Trenny was going to phone home and he was going to intercept the phone call somehow, or somebody else was going to call and he was going to intercept the call. I don't know what the idea of all that was, but we all know the story about Robert Simpson Sr. He was district attorney in Knoxville at the time. So you know, if Robert had done anything wrong, basically his father knew how to counsel him and how to keep him from getting in trouble.
Right, right. See, this is why I wonder, you know, where how all this connects together in a way that really makes sense because Simpson acts like he had or acted like he had a stake in something here. To me, is what it feels like in the bottom line. Somewhere along the line, he feels like he had a dog in the race. You know, then there's Bob who you know I mean he was really Trini's go-to person. That was her person. And
Yeah,
the two were very connected in that they were friends. But I can't help but wonder, if somehow I just see Hope being in the background, pulling strings all the time through all of this. Pulling strings,
like
being one of the
the puppeteer.
yeah, yeah, and orchestrating a lot of things in the process. So what I guess I'm really kind of wondering is, you we know that Hope was not a fan of Bowman. We know that Hope was probably
No,
not a fan of Derek Scott. You know,
no,
there was nothing about Trini's relationship with these two young men that really cast a positive light for them in Hope's eyes. And this was her daughter. This was
mhm,
her child. You know, and their reputation as a family hung on the fact that their daughter was involved with these two young men who were not exactly, in the eyes of the church, especially,
no.
again, a big factor with her because she was very
Yeah,
much,
they
yeah,
both shared one little detail that, yeah, just didn't.
yeah.
Um, and Robert Simpson, I've read the statement that he gave the police, and it's pretty ridiculous. Doesn't really say much of anything. That they wanted to know basically what he and Trenny had done on the field trip. They wanted an account of what happened, and it basically reads like this: We went up to the ball. She was fine. We ate lunch. I don't think she was going anywhere because she gave me half her sandwich because she couldn't finish it. And we looked around a little bit while we were on the bald, and then it started to rain, so we got under a tree, and then we looked around a bit more, and then I said that I was going to go track a bear, and she said that she would leave then, and she just headed back down to the bus, and that's the last I seen of her, kind of thing.
Uh,
So there's he left gave absolutely no details, um, nothing.
right, right.
There's nothing to say that. I told her, well, do you want to stay around here for a little while longer? No, no, I want to go to the bus. Well, I'm supposed to kind of be watching you, so I guess I'll go back with you, kind of thing, or whatever. But no, he kind of drops his duties and decides to stay at the Bald and look for this bear.
Right. Now, the one thing that we really haven't touched on yet that is a key factor, I think, in all of this too, and again, makes me kind of like put an eye on Hope and go, what do you think about this? Is the fact that know, there was the bathroom there at Klingman's Dome, what was
Hmm.
called Klingman's Dome at that point.
Yeah.
That was called into question because at one point, you know, Trini went to the bathroom there. Uh, there was some discussion about whether uh, the missing jewelry, Trinity's missing jewelry, and the comb uh, was somehow connected with that visit to the bathroom there, and how all that plays into what happened to Trini, what really happened to Trini, and uh, the connection that Simpson had with it, the connection that really formed everything that looked wrong and suspicious about this. It's just there was whatever happened revolving around that bathroom and that time in the bathroom. There seemed like there were questions that were raised from that are still unanswered, still kind of you know out there, and it makes me wonder if again somewhere along the line, Hope knows something about all of that that ties it together and makes it very suspicious. Because is that not also like the last place that Trini was reportedly seen at was that bathroom?
Well, there's a couple of different stories. One fellow that I've interviewed, his name is Daddy Johnson. He
Mhm.
was the one that Mr. Dunlap chose to help search for Trenny when she was first discovered missing at roll call on the bus. So I've interviewed Danny, and I mean, I understand it's been many years. It's easy enough to misremember things. And Danny was dating a girl at the time named Stacy Martin, and she was a track star at Bearden. Danny
Mhm.
was also a track star. He was very involved in track and field, and he was also a photographer. Anyway, he was on the field trip that day, and so was Stacy. Now, when I interviewed Danny, he told me that he actually joined up with Robert Simpson and Trenny and walked back down to the bus with them that day. They came back down to the bus, he said, and then Trenny excused herself. She has said she had to use the washroom. She went to the washroom where the building was and just never came back. That's how he tells the story. But then when everyone gets on the bus and Mr. Dunlop notices, hey, there's no Trenny, he gets Danny. He tells Danny, okay, Danny, I need you to go back to the Bald and look for Trenny. And I said to Danny, if Trenny disappeared, like she went to the washroom and just never came back, isn't that where you'd start? Point last seen? Wouldn't it be like, hey, Mr. Dunlap, can you maybe get one of the girls to check? Because she went to the bathroom and never came back. But I said, no, you just go straight to Andrew's Bald to look for her there. It didn't make sense. So then I tracked down Danny's girlfriend, Stacy Martin. And she recollects that she was walking with Danny. She was hiking with Danny on the trip. And she said she and Danny were the first group that were back to the bus. And they stood there just kind of chatting with the bus driver and whatever till the other students slowly started coming back down the hill and into the bus and so on to get ready to go back to Knoxville. Never once did she say that Danny had been hiking with Robert Simpson and Trenny. It was always she and Danny were together, and they were the first ones that were back. So I don't know if somebody's trying to cover up something or they're just not remembering things clearly, but that was Danny's recollection, was she disappeared at the washroom. So then Robert Simpson told Hope that Trenny had taken her ring off in the washroom when she was washing her hands, and she gave the ring to a girl in the sophomore class to hold for her, kind of thing. And Trenny gave her comb to Robert Simpson to hold for her, kind of thing. And the comb was found on the dash of his car, and it was Trenny's brother Bob that found it. The ring went from one sophomore girl who originally was supposed to get it in the bathroom to another sophomore girl. So somehow it got handed off from one to the other, if that story is true. And like I said to Hope, I said, I don't know what teenage boy is an authority on girls' jewelry and who gave what to who, but somehow Robert Simpson seems to know who Trenny gave her ring to.
Right, right. And see, that's the reason why that it's very, that part of the story is very suspicious to me. It raises a lot of questions in the long run. I feel like the connection to that bathroom and Trini's disappearance and where it falls into in line to the story itself, I feel like there's a lot of incredibly unanswered questions revolving that particular point of the story. Now, with that said, though, what are your thoughts on Hope and her? I guess I'm really trying to sort out, it was Hope the ringleader of a really messed up plan? Was she uh, really the innocent person in all of this who just looked bad because of the way she was trying to protect things and protect people and so forth? Or, is there something more to Hope's involvement, to Bob's involvement, to Simpson's involvement, you know, and to the two boys that Trini was involved with at one point? Is there something more there that we are just not getting at this point?
With regards to Hope, I I don't think that she wanted anybody to find out anything and or talk about things that would paint, the family in a not so favorable light, and she didn't want Trenny painted in a not so favorable light. And to a certain degree, I understand that. I've given these interviews a few times. I've gotten some flack from people who say that I'm trying to tarnish Trenny's memory, trying to tarnish her image. And all I have to say to that is, this has gone on for more than 50 years, nearly 50 years now. And I said is touched a lot of people, and I said it has harmed a lot of people as well. In trying to paint this picture perfect family, it's impacted and to a degree ruined a lot of other people's lives. And I also say that, sometimes when you can't find anything in the light, you have to go search in the dark, and you have to go places where you don't really want to go, but to get to where you need to go, you got to go there. And you find out some stuff you'd rather not know, but that's kind of collateral damage, and that's the price that's got to be paid. I never got into this to try to make anybody look bad, only to find out what happened to Trenny. I mean, she wasn't a saint. She was just a young teenage girl, but she deserved a lot better than what she got. Um,
Absolutely.
and there's a lot of Trenny's extended family. They just want to know while they're here on Earth, what the hell happened to their cousin or their niece, their friend. They just want to know. Hope,
Mhm.
I think, is content with, she's 86 years old now. She's content, when she passes on and goes to the great beyond. Well, then she'll be reunited with Trenny and that sort of thing. And I say that's all fine and good, but it's not good enough for the ones that are still on Earth here and that are missing her. I mean, I've only lived with this for about 20 years, but what about her family and friends that have gone on with this for nearly half a century now? And I can put it away or shut it off if I have to, and they can never get away from it. It's always there. You know, the family, they just want to know. They don't care, like, Bob did something to so and so or whatever in 1970. They don't care about stuff like that. They just want to know what happened to Trenny.
Right.
And Hope is essentially, in not being 100% truthful, she's muddied the waters in a lot of ways, and she's made it take a lot longer, and having to take additional routes and reroute things and go another direction in order to try and find out more and circumvent the damage that she's caused. And I suggested to her too, this is when we were still talking a few years back, that if she had Trenny legally declared dead, then we'd be able to get access to all the information. We'd have everything. No, I can't do that and whatever. And it's like, well, you seem to want to know what happened to her, and you don't want to know what happened to her. And how long are you going to let this go on for?
Right.
But there again, there's no handbook or rule book for how to deal with this kind of thing when your child is missing. So I guess that this, in a way, is kind of just her way, but it's sure been hell for a lot of people. Let's put it that way.
Right. Exactly. Do you feel like, bottom line, I guess, with all of this, do you feel like, um, I mean, obviously, when we talk about finding justice for Trini, you know, that at this point in the game, it's a very long stretch. Uh, my understanding from our conversations is that you feel like Trini never actually left the park, uh, at least like in,
No,
yeah,
I don't feel that she did. I think that for some reason, Trenny was accosted by a small group of students. I believe Robert Simpson was involved, either where he ended up blamed for it, but he wasn't 100% at fault. To the point where he was kind of there. She was accosted by a small group of students. I don't know what she was accosted over. That's what I work on, and it's tedious trying to uncover what. I think they took her belongings from her. I believe she was wearing Robert's jacket at the time. And when somebody grabbed her, the jacket being as large as it was, they grabbed the sleeves or the back of it, and she was able to peel out of it, and she took off running, and she went so far into the thickety underbrush in the park that she passed away there due to the elements. They weren't able to find her just because she plunged so far in the undergrowth that she couldn't get out again. And I
yeah,
think that's likely what happened. A small part of me thinks it's possible she could have left the park by car, but I don't think it was a planned thing where she got this boyfriend to meet her, or something like that. My thoughts are she might have gotten away from these kids and got in a car with thinking that this person was going to help her, and then that's where she met her end.
and see, that's what I wonder too. I wonder if maybe that Hope is all very aware of this whole situation, that she's aware of the fact that, you know, Trini's actions caused some reactions with her peers, that
Mm.
there was, you know, things that probably happened that day that should not have happened as a result of that. And you for the better part of all of the story, you know, I wonder if, perhaps Hope, you know, in the final outcome wasn't thinking, you know, but for the fact that this is part of the reality, that my daughter was involved with you know people and things that made her unpopular with this group of people. But for the fact
Mhm.
that they did what they did, you know, my daughter would still be alive today had this not happened and played out this way. But you, I guess, I guess for me, trying to you know bring this all home to a comfortable place, because we all want the story to have a comfortable ending for us somehow. All of us seem to kind of like that idea of comfort. Um, and it feels like to me that ultimately, this story ended the way it did, predominantly because you again, all of the but fors, all the things that happened, all the coincidences that led to the outcome, you know, was not necessarily inevitable, but that's how it did play out. And I feel like Hope kind of, in her own way, you know, she knew, she knew all of the things. She knew, you know, the outcome, the whys, the wheres, the who did it, and
I
in the
I think, sorry to interrupt you, but I think
yeah,
that likely Bob, when Bob was up at in Gatlinburg that weekend when they were searching for Trenny in the park, I
mhm,
think Bob found out something, likely from Robert Simpson. Um,
mhm,
he was told something or found out something, and he told Hope what happened, and Hope believed that that was likely the most logical explanation for what happened to Trenny. And hard as it was, she knew that she was gone and she wasn't going to, was very likely she wasn't going to find her, wasn't going to see her again, kind of thing. And she sort of resigned herself to that. I think that's why Hope kind of stayed in the background and stayed quiet while the search went on and on, because Hope knew that it was very likely that they weren't going to find anything. I think Bob heard something and confided it in her. Likely he heard it from Robert Simpson. I don't think he would have heard it from any of the searchers. If it did, it's never seemed to come to light. But I'm thinking Robert Simpson told Bob, and then Bob told his mother.
mhm,
Now, Trenny's got that branch of family with the uncles and cousin, and they always had an inkling that Bob somehow was involved in it, whereas he went to the park that day. I don't 100% know if I'm in on that. I don't know exactly why Bob would go to the park, unless he was desperate to find Trenny for some reason and get her out of there. But I don't know why he would do that, why he just wouldn't, why they just wouldn't go somewhere from Knoxville. I'm not sure. I know Bob wasn't 100% necessarily the most responsible person, but I don't believe he was in the park. But the cousin and the uncles, they believe Bob was in the park that day, and likely Trenny got in a car with him.
yeah, I kind
But
of tend to lean toward that.
I can't see Trenny, even, if she was wet, cold, miserable, on this damn field trip, up here in the Smokies. It's piss and rain. My hair's wet, my shoes are wet, my socks are wet. This is horrible. Get me the hell out of here. She, might have told her teacher what she thought, kind of thing. I can't see her, thumbing her nose at Mr. Dunlap, running
Mhm.
across her brother, standing off trail, and just getting in the car with him and buggering off and leaving Mr. Dunlap hanging. I can't see that happening. So
Right,
And
right.
I
Because
don't know why Bob would go to the park, because he attended Bearden. He had just graduated in June. Like, people would have seen him. He would have stuck out like a sore thumb. They would have recognized him and everything. So I really can't see like why he would turn up there. I got some flack from that interview because I get people, well, how the hell would he have known where they were and all this and blah, blah. And I said, you got to remember, I said, the night before, Mr. Dunlap was burning up the phone lines all over Knoxville looking for a chaperone. I said, and it wasn't like he was going to tell him, hey, I need you to come with me on this field trip tomorrow. I can't tell you where we're going till we're on the bus ready to leave the school. Like, that would never have happened. Of course, he would have told him where they were going. So, people would have found out that way. Secondly, it was very, very likely that the school would have known. So if Bob wanted to find Trenny badly enough, if he went to Bearden and said, hey, there's some kind of emergency, whatever, I have to find my sister, they likely would have told him where the school trip had gone. So, I mean, if he wanted to find out badly enough, he could have. I just don't see what the motive for him turning up at the park would have been. And, the cousin and the uncle said, well, the cigarettes. And I'm like, well, Bob wasn't the only one that would have smoked those cigarettes. I mean, the company managed to stay in business without just Bob Gibson buying that brand of cigarettes, and the same with the can of beer. So
right. Yeah, I feel like there was a lot of things pointed toward Bob that necessarily was not quite accurate in thought over this whole thing.
But like
Um,
I tell people, I said, Trenny's family, they've been missing her for nearly half a century. There isn't a scenario that hasn't gone through their head, that they haven't thought of and wondered if that could have been what happened to her. I said there's thousands upon thousands of different scenarios that they've come across, and then this is just one of them. And I said they knew Bob. I said I never met the guy, so they have their reasons potentially for thinking of that. To me, having Bob at the park just makes it a little too messy. I just don't know why he would have gone up there that day. And I don't know why Trenny would have thumbed her nose at Dunlap and then just got in the car with Bob and took off. Um,
right.
I did interview one student that was on the field trip, and he said that Trenny left the parking lot. And I said, well, did she leave the parking lot before the hike, or did she leave the parking lot after you all came back from hiking? Well, he can't really remember. He did a lot of drugs in those days, so things are a little hazy.
Well,
So I would venture to guess he meant like after the hike. I would hope so, or else a lot of frickin' people have been lying. So
right. Yeah, it does make you wonder altogether. So many things make me wonder about this story. Well, Laura, I really appreciate that you came on to throw some light um, on the characters behind this disappearance. There's so many things about this case that just, questions. It all just raises more questions sometimes than we get answers for. And, just the amount of work and time that you've put into all of this has been phenomenal. And it really does, it kind of sheds a lot of light for me, I know, on some of those questions. You know, what are, where do these people, what point are these people, you know, players in the game, and at what point are these people, suspicious characters in the game? I think it's very important that we
well,
we
there's
have this
two, like
information.
there's Mr. Dunlap. Some people, question him. Was he a suspect? There's park rangers. I've had people ask, could it be possible it was one of them? Of course, there's the William Bradford Bishop story. Could that have been connected to Trenny's disappearance? He was that felon that murdered his family, and he was hiding in the park. That was in March of '76, so it was around this time of year. So there's that thought too. Could Trenny have encountered him? There's also a few serial killers that were active in and around that area at the time. One being Joe Shepard, and Hope Gibson actually contacted the authorities to see if they could look into his whereabouts at the time and to see if he could be a potential fit for Trenny's disappearance, for lack of a better way to say it. Samuel Little is another one. Right now, he's one of the most prolific serial killers in America, with 60 confirmed victims. Then the other one is Gary Hilton. Now, he wasn't really active that we know of till around 1997, I believe, but he was the guy that murdered that couple. They were like 80 and 84 years old. I think it was in '07 or '08. They were from the Carolinas. I can't remember if it was North or South Carolina, but he murdered them. He also murdered a young lady. He would approach women. Usually, he'd have a dog with him, and then through the animal, he would kind of, gain their trust a little bit. He's unique in that he murdered male, female, young, old, didn't matter, sort of things. So there's also that to consider as well.
There really is. There's a lot of things that a lot of people, wow, there's a lot of people that call into question, could they have been part of this? Could they have been a key factor in Trinity's disappearance? And I think that begs for even more research and time, as if we need more reason to have research. Um, Again, you've shed a lot of light on some very dark places in this story tonight, and I think it's very helpful. I think it's very important that we understand some of these key players, uh, their importance in the outcome of the story, and their importance in the future of you know, the research that goes into trying to understand this case. Um, and I'm looking forward to working with you in the future on uh, getting
Absolutely.
getting some more information, yet more digging in some of these dark corners to see what we can pull out, and look forward to just really trying to get to the bottom of this for once and for all. Because I think this is one of those cases
Yes.
that, yeah, this is a case that begs for a definitive answer at some point. Um, so again, just thank you so much for your time and energy in this and your investigation. I I'm going to I guess leave you with the question, as far as final thoughts go for tonight. What, if anything, do you feel that we can learn from the story of Trinity's disappearance?
Well, you gotta love your children, keep them close, but you also have to let them learn and let them make their own mistakes, of course, to a degree. um, and may the loss not go forgotten. This story did happen many years ago, but Trenny, she deserves justice, and she deserves not to be forgotten. And there's a lot of cases, when even from when I was on the scene as a young kid, early mid 80s. That was kind of when things changed. Bills were put into Congress where you didn't have to wait 48 hours to report someone missing anymore. People Trenny's age back in the 70s, they were just looked at as, they just ran away. They couldn't hack it or whatever. They just took off, ran away, and they always seemed to run away to California. I know the climate's better there, but that was always where they seemed to take off and go. And we know now that that a lot of that wasn't 100% true. A lot of those kids met with foul play and whatever. But we also got to keep in mind it doesn't seem to matter. I don't know if you've heard, but the Martin case. They were a family that went missing in Oregon in the 1950s. I guess there's been a major development in their case today. I got a notification on Facebook, so when we get off here, I'll have to read that and see what happened. I think they found the car.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe 1958 or 59, they went searching for Christmas greenery, and they all disappeared. They found two of the girls, I want to say about 15 years ago. So somehow their father drove off a cliff and into the water, and the car was in such a place that they couldn't get to it till now. And I think a team of divers have gone out and they've recovered the car. So perhaps they can find out if it was an accident or what happened.
Hopefully so.
Pretty interesting book. They wrote a book about the case a few years ago. Maybe one day I'll write a book too. So
That would be awesome, actually. It would be very informative. All right. If you will, hang out for a moment. I'm going to go in and close this out for the night. I don't know about everybody else, but I need a breather after all this. This was a lot to ingest tonight. But I will be right back with you in just a moment then.
Okay.
All right, guys. Wow. I'm telling you, every time I have a conversation with Laura, I learn more and more about this case that makes me have so many unanswered questions. But it's important. This is important to digest. And for those of us who are invested in some way or another in Trenny's story, these discussions are vital. So I appreciate you guys for hanging out with us tonight, for allowing us to share with you this information. Take with you what you will with this, and hopefully in your research into Trenny and what happened with her, this will somehow bring about conclusions that you may have that are working and vital conclusions. My final thought for tonight for you guys, just be careful, be kind to each other. Understand that the world we live in is crazy. It's a scary place. It is a survivable place. And as always, may your journey always be magical.
I've waited for so long to see when you come back to me. Through the wars and battles that were lost, we're born again, it's you and me. The rest is history. Past lives. Past lives. the sun.